think this is the first in-person talk show in almost 2 years. So we're all here finally again. So enjoy it. Let me just introduce Gordon a little bit. I know a lot of you know Gordon and know all about him, but some people don't know about Gordon. Gordon is the co-founder and artistic director of Pullman Films. Pullman, of course, is one of the great documentary houses in the country, really. They've had so many great films have come through, and Gordon has produced, directed, mentored so many people that have come through the doors of Pullman. He's also, some people don't know this, but he's also been an advocate his whole life and an activist, really, for independent media. And that, I don't think you get much attention for that because it's kind of like behind the scenes, but it's very, I think you were involved in the creation of ITVS even, which is profound, really, for filmmakers like us. Also, Gordon is an expert on fair use, which again is kind of under the radar, but for us, it means so much for to be able to use things and to not fight all kinds of legal fights and pay millions of dollars for footage that we should be able to use and show. So thank you for your long battle on the fair use front. And also, just finally, the introduction is that Gordon, as Jeff Spitz, has mentored so many filmmakers over the years. And one thing I will say, because he's looked at many of my films and done rough cut critiques, is that there's hardly anybody I know that could zero in on story. And that's so important to me and to all of you and all the other filmmakers. I think you and Jerry Blumenthal was Gordon's partner for many years, who passed away a few years ago. The two of them, when they did a critique, they zeroed in on story, and they could really help filmmakers think about the story in a new way. Or was it working? What wasn't working, etc. So really just want to say thank you for all those times you watched all those rough cuts.
Well, thanks for the words, Bob.
Sure. I want to jump into this. Gordon was born in Washington, D.C., but he lived most of his younger years in Virginia. And you were growing up at a time in the middle of Jim Crow, and kind of in the South, really, Virginia. And I just wondered how that affected you when you were growing up in the midst of that time in Virginia. What was that like, and how did that help shape you?
Yeah, great question. I mean, my parents were both from Boston. I'm in Arlington, Virginia, going to segregated schools. This is the 1950s by law. And I'm one of the few kids in my class. But I remember when we had my social studies teacher, there would be a debate, and there would be those of us who were for integration, which was like 4 kids, and the rest of the class on the other side.
Was it a mixed class, or was it all?
Well, the important thing to know about the East Coast segregation, it only applied to black people. President of my senior class, I was just telling the story earlier, was Jim Hamasaki. Kid in front of me in Spanish class was Carlos from Venezuela. He got a C. I flunked. First year Spanish, I thought it would be easy. But its roots were in slavery, and that really is what that was about. And so that had a lot to do, I think, with shaping me, because I was like an outsider in many ways. I remember, it's kind of relevant now with what's going on in Ukraine. I remember in '56, the Hungarian Revolution, and it was like, finally, I'm going to be on the popular side, because I felt if the tanks were in the streets against the people, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And there was going to be one of these debates in that class, and I got the flu, and I couldn't go to school. I was heartbroken, my chance to be on the popular side. But I think it did, kind of, we all have our traumas from high school, but I think that it taught me to stick by my guns, and that if you fight for things, you can win things. I mean, you talked a little bit about media advocacy, and I'm a great advocate for the younger generation. It's like, we have to make this field what it should be and what we want it to be. And we won some battles over the years.
We did.
Decisive battles, and really changed the industry. Jeff was talking about, Netflix, and I think that years ago somebody asked me, I was on a panel or something, and they said, what does PBS want? Because we were working with PBS. And I said, that's the wrong question. What do you want to do? And how are you going to make PBS want what you want, the story you want to tell?
Right.
That's the question, and that's,
Not forcing you to make something or shape something in a way
fit it
that
into
wasn't
their
really
box.
what your
Yeah.
true passion was, but instead turn the tables on it and say, this is what we're doing. You should want these programs.
And
Independent
strategically, how do we make them want that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. You eventually found your way up to Chicago and went to the University of Chicago, and I wondered, how did that happen, and why Chicago? Why did you go to the University of Chicago?
It was the right school for me, but it was sort of an accident. I thought I wanted to go. I grew up in the suburbs. I knew I hated the suburbs. I thought I wanted to be in a rural area. Maybe I wanted to be a farmer. I had all these romantic notions.
I can't see you as a farmer.
Yeah, me neither. But I had these ideas, and I went out to see. My dad was in Chicago for some kind of conference or something, convention, and I went on to Grinnell and looked at Grinnell, and
There's some Grinnellites here.
and they were, this was 1960, 59. They were having a panty raid on campus, and I was like, maybe this isn't the school for me. And then my dad tells me,
the school for a lot of people.
well, it was, anyway, he tells me to go check out. He had done some graduate work at the University of Chicago. He never finished because it was the Depression. So why don't you just go down there and take a look at it? And I went down and I met with someone, and they kind of told me about the program, and that was it. It was the only place I wanted to go. It was my top choice. And I think I was in the lowest, everyone I knew in college had a scholarship except me. I was in that lowest. They lit the final,
You just got under the wall.
Yeah, but I loved it. And they didn't have, I'd already gotten interested in film, but they didn't have any film programs. I took whatever novels into film, they had. But I studied literature and philosophy and history. And, when I go and speak at a liberal arts college, they, sometimes they like me there because someone will ask, well, where'd you go to film school? I never went to film school. I learned as an apprentice, but I use what I learned in college every day in my work because I studied the liberal arts. I studied what it is to have an argument, to tell a story. Those are the things that we're all really about on the highest level. And so it was a great education. Now Judy Hoffman is down there actually teaching film production, which is amazing.
Yeah, they actually have that now.
Yeah, I mean, we did a film when we were students called The College, and I was doing the sound, and no one had taught me when you do sound, the VU meter should go all the way up to the red. You want to record it at the highest level you could. But I thought, no, it sounds so much better if I keep it way down here. Of course, then it was going to be mixed, so I really didn't know what I was doing. Because it was, but then I did get in, started working for people and learned more as an apprentice.
What attracted you to film, since there wasn't even a film program? It's somewhat unlikely.
I'd seen some movies that really moved me. Feature films, He Who Must Die, which I understand, and I've never revisited that movie because I'm sure I'd be disappointed. But I saw some other films that really, and
But
then
not documentaries, but
the first, I'd seen some documentaries, and I liked them, but the one that sort of I saw quintuplets that are born, and I saw that documentary that sort of turned into something else. It was verite.
because they followed the story.
They followed the story, and I saw that, and it was just like, that's what I want to do. I knew, I was with Doc Films. It was first or second year. We saw it in the basement of Good Speed, where Doc Films was at that era, and it was like, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to do.
And that was a very exciting time for filmmaking, for doc filmmaking, because the cameras had started to become smaller, and you could do handheld shooting, and it's hard for us to imagine in the old days. The cameras were so huge, you basically have to have a tripod. And so that was, I think that was a revolutionary change. And then it brought about those people like Maisel Brothers and
they were,
and,
yeah, and they were creating the cameras, literally creating them and designing them. And, you know, this is jumping ahead a few years, but I was working for a guy, Mike Shea, and he brought back to Chicago the first Leacock Pennybaker camera.
oh, okay.
So we had the first crystal control, no wire between the sound person and
wireless.
wireless crystal control.
You really had mobility.
Yeah, and that I was working for Shea doing sound. And I saw how important this was, and then my friend at the university, Dane, who was a physicist, and I was explaining to him this technology and everything. He says, well, you've got the camera. I did general camera conversion, you know, an Oricon conversion. She was an intern. It's called camera one. I was looking at this thing, and I know you guys all work with a DSLR, and if you look at how much weight it is, because it's on our body. And it's balanced, and we have that third point of contact, which is looking through an eyepiece, not looking at a little flip out screen. So just think about that sometimes. I'm a big fan of this shape.
It focuses your eye more because it's an eye cup.
like we had this philosophy and then we stuck with it.
Mm-hmm.
We were dialectical. We were just as you are when you make a documentary. You interact with the world. You interact with something that's happening in front of the camera, and that changes your strategy. It changes your thinking because reality is impinging upon whatever theories and vision you have for the film. You have to kind of take into account where the story wants to go. And as an institution, I think we've done that over the years. We within the first 5 years, we had evolved into a collective where we're all reading Mao, and we're part of the revolution, and we're gonna change the world. And you look at some of those films, Last Pullman Car, Chicago Maternity Center film. They're very far away in some ways from cinema verite. They have an argument. They're polemical. They are films to be made to be a part of and to work for the people who are trying to make the revolution, so to speak.
And it's in the heart of the '60s as well. So I'm sure that was part of it.
Yeah, we were a part of that. And the collective was, it was a combination of people who came out of filmmaking background and people like Richard Schmeeken, who went on to be involved in the Times of Harvey Milk, and was an editor and had that background. But some of the people who were most active were like teachers and union organizers and people like that. So it was kind of this group of people who saw media as having a role to play in that kind of social context.
Why did you decide to, one of your first films was Home for Life, which was about a nursing home, and I thought it's interesting that people in their early 20s decided to make a film about that.
Well, and the irony is that's where I am in my life right now, almost, it's like really
full circle.
Yeah, but opportunity. Temner got the opportunity, and this, the Drexel home had some money, and he created, pitched them on the idea of our making this verite film and giving us the run of their home to do whatever they want. But it was really that opportunity, and I was working in New York as an editor with Howard All, who I had apprenticed with, and in a lot of ways, I really wanted to come back to Chicago. And so I came back and we made this film, and it was kind of the founding of our template. And I also had been editing, and I continued to edit film for many years. It's how I used to make my living too. But Home for Life was a chance to shoot. I'd done a little bit of shooting, but nothing really major.
So you were the primary
photographer,
right?
Yeah, but it was it was a film in an institution, and I think we also learned some valuable lessons on that. We thought if we made a film that held a mirror up to society, just show people the reality, that will sort of lead to social change. What we hadn't really understood was power relationships, that you have to pay attention to who has power and who doesn't. And so with Home for Life, we thought it was going to start a conversation in America and a fundamental thinking about how we deal with the elderly in our society. That's not really what happened. Film was quite successful. It was used a lot. It was used to improve old age homes. That was it. And so
something.
So it was something, but we saw that, and I think that influenced the collective period too, where we realized you always have to be rethinking how you confront with the historical period that you're in and the society that you're in. And in our early work, I really look back, and and in that paper that we published, Cinematic Social Empire, it's like we weren't paying attention to power relationships.
And then eventually you and Jerry and the others got more involved in labor organizing films, and films about labor, including labor's long descent, as we've seen. So how did you shift a little bit into doing, you did Taylor Chain 1, Taylor Chain 2, and The Last Pullman Car. And Taylor Chain, both those films were about labor negotiations, and they were largely, not exclusively, but largely verite films about that process. And it's interesting, the camera's in there in a place that you really wouldn't expect a camera to be.
In Taylor Chain 2 is literally about the labor negotiations. We are in with the company and the union right inside. We're the first ones to have filmed that process in the U.S. It had been done in Canada. And I had started going to Gary back even in the 60s. Gary, Indiana. In the early days of Scott and Lynn had a program for young people down there. It was called the Writers' Workshop. It was largely people who were the sons and daughters of steelworkers and people from the mills. They were, came out of these mill families, and they had this workshop, and I kind of became a part of that. And that drew me into this labor, an early thing we did, Where's I.W. Abel, in half-inch video, was to be an advocacy film for a rank and file union group. But, early on I wanted to do some things about labor and thought it was a good way to kind of engage with, the working class and that kind of thing. And, it was, the two Taylor Chain films were actually done almost 10 years apart. We did the first one about a strike that the rank and file goes out about goes on strike against the company, but they don't have permission from the union. So it's also, or they stay out on strike. I'm sorry, the union has agreed to go back
beyond what the union wants.
And so the staff man from the union, when he saw the film, he was like, yeah, I know you guys think I'm a bit of a stuffed shirt, but that's my life. That's my real life, and you've captured what my life is. And we wanted, at that time, we really wanted the steelworkers. It was a steelworker local. We wanted the union endorsement for our film. And he said, I'll take you guys to Pittsburgh and we'll try to get the endorsement for the film, even though he comes off not great in the film. And he did. And my argument to the steelworkers, to a guy who later became the president, was, you have a problem in labor. People think it's a lot of fat guys in the back room making a deal and selling people out. What you see in Taylor Chain 1 is democracy in action. You see people voting and arguing and sort of being totally engaged on making decisions about what's going to have consequences in their own lives. It's a very edgy democratic process, and people criticize it too. Why did we have an open vote? I felt intimidated. Other people, because they raised their hands. And I said, that's what you need. It's not, you think it's dirty laundry, but that's what you need to go against it. And they gave us their endorsement. They put it in the Steelworker newspaper, which at that time went to 1.3 million steelworkers across the country.
Wow.
It was when later, and it was great. And then 10 years later, this same staff man says, hey, we're in labor negotiations, the recession, the plant is on the verge of closing. I think I could get you into the actual negotiations that are going on.
Those are fascinating.
Yeah.
Scenes. Then you, in that same period, you decided to do a film about the Pullman Car Factory, which was going to close down, which was devastating to the Pullman community. How did you? Let's actually, maybe we'll show the clip of Pullman, and then we'll talk about it.
I'll tell you how we got involved. Yeah.
It's called The Last Pullman Car.
We got to have a national movement against the shutdowns.
Can we just tell the country and the communities to go to hell and just close it down and make a ghost town out of it?
If they think that the membership is going to sit there, lay down and die and give up virtually everything that the labor struggle has always done, they've got to be crazy.
We have to have a government and our company behind us. Then we're willing to stand up and work and fight for our rights, and our rights is to work.
Out of all the things that George Pullman and his establishment did, it seems like today they still got the last laugh, because all the money and all the billions of dollars that they made, they shipped it overseas somewhere to let somebody else build the cars for all Americans to ride on. And all the Pullman workers, no matter how much time they had, or how to work here. And so in essence, he still got the last laugh, took the money, and ran.
Well, I don't want a million.
woman singing is Barbara Dane. People know who she is, and there's a new film coming out about her, and she took this old classic song and adapted it to what we did for us for this film. So keep an eye out for the Barbara Dane film. I should know the title of it, but I don't.
One thing about that film, I remember I had just moved to Chicago and was kind of interested in labor. I saw that film and it just kind of blew me away. And because you weaved the present day stuff that's going on in the present with a whole history, really, but you wove it in. So it's not like just first there's this and then there's this, but it was beautifully woven. The backstory, the story of how Pullman started in the late 1800s with George Pullman, and then but weaved it in with the modern day closing of the last car leaves the,
I mean, we essentially tell the history of the rise of industrial unions and CIO and all of that, and the rise of monopolies and conglomerates. We cram that whole history into an hour movie. And the way we got into it, to go back to what you were asking me before, we were approached by a group of workers from Pullman. We were approached by the union local, and they said, "We're fighting to save our jobs. It's a great story. You should follow our story."
So it was their idea.
It was their idea
that's cool.
to make the movie, and but it was, we had to, the union leaders were into it, but we actually had to win the kind of confidence of the workers. So I remember we had a film festival down there, and we showed, Harlan County, I remember showing, and we showed some documentaries so that they could understand what we were about. And then we kind of built this relationship with the local. And as we thought we would follow their struggle, that's where we began. And they were going to these demonstrations and things. But pretty early on, we realized, they're going to lose. There's no way. The plant's going to
too much against them, and
and they knew
the nature of our society.
Yeah, and so we really felt, as we had with the Chicago Maternity Center story, where the same thing happened, we had to broaden the story to explain the larger social forces and power relationships that were at work, so that people who were going to struggle around these issues in the future would understand what they're up against and would understand what those. So that's why the film, the film is an argument. The film is a polemic. You don't quite see it here, but we're coming from cinema verite. In some of our early films, like Thumbs Down, I look at it now and say, we've got all these awkward intertitles. No narration. We weren't going to have a narrator. Blah blah blah.
But you do have a narrator in this.
Yes, we have a very engaged narrator, and so
it's needed, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I'm getting at. That we knew that we couldn't keep making the same film over and over again. We had to adapt our storytelling techniques to the needs of the story that needed to be told.
Right.
So it's a very different.
It's a great film. It really it shows what's about to happen, which was the collapse, really, of the labor.
Yeah.
We have to move forward. I know. Okay. So I wanted to jump to the film Gala, which is one of my favorite films of yours. It's a film about Leon Gala, the artist, who's a very political artist. And just briefly, because we're going to start running out of time.
Okay, we're going to go quicker. Yeah.
How did you get involved? We'll talk about it for a second, and we'll show the clip.
Yeah, Gala was, Jerry and I both had always been interested. He had been married to many years to an artist. And we were both interested in the role that art and the arts play in a democratic process.
Right.
And so here's this artist, and we had someone who came to us through Peter Gilbert, who was a guy who had seen some of our other work. He said, I want to back a movie with you guys. He was going to give us like a third of the
Just
money.
the guy you want to meet.
Well, he's gone. He's dead. I could tell you some stories later. But yeah. Anyway, he wanted to back us, and not like the guy. This is a slight digression, but somebody once did walk in the door at Kertempuin, and he wanted his life story told, And we explained it's very expensive and film and blah, 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 blah. And he came back like a week later with like a bag of money. You know, and we were like, I don't think so. We kind of, you know, his name wasn't Corleone, but we got that. And anyway, this guy wanted to back us, and we knew the kind of guy he was. What could we do that what we're passionate about? You know, labor wasn't going to be it for him. You know, we could see that, but he did have this interest in art, and so we went. Golub was having a show in Chicago. We went with him, and we were just all knocked out. You know, it was like, okay, this is it. Jerry already knew who Golub, you know, knew about him as an artist, and you know, every 10 years or so, I like to do something that looks at art and artists, how it gets made, and the role that it can play in democracy. That's really how it came about.
Let's show the clip, just a little piece from the film Golub, from like 88.
Yeah, somewhere.
Logically, I'm safely inside this very nice museum and everything, but there's something that really puts these things on the edge.
You can't just sort of look at that and say, oh, that's an interesting picture and walk on. You can't do that. I guess the image just goes into you. And maybe it has its effect on you, and it may make a difference in something that I do a day or a week or a year from now.
You really can't see it on TV. I mean, all the nuances, you just can't. You have to see it in person. It's very moving. You tell the artist that.
I'm not going to do it this way. I think we're going to put a pistol in here. Okay. All right, I'll show you the kind of gun I want. Something like this, okay?
Barrel.
Yeah. Look at all the photos of guns I have. We'll put this back. Everybody knows that guns are really phalluses, so we're going to go out and buy a phallus. Toy one, of course. I'll give you $20 right around the corner on Bleecker Street. There's a toy store. Get a receipt for it. Okay. In the past, I've cut out a piece of cardboard, a flat piece of cardboard, and then put my fingers around it and drawn it on tracing paper. Then you turn the tracing paper around, and that's like your right hand. That's how I've done it, but this is going to be better.
Show it somewhere again sometimes.
Yeah, no, we do show it.
Yeah, I think the thing it's such a moving film in any way, but with the first scenes in there, you show the art goers, the people at the museum, and focus on them. And that's one thing I think I learned from you in some films I've done, is to not just focus on the art or whatever the primary subject is, but how does it affect the people at the gallery?
That experience.
So in our next clip, jumping forward, Gordon and I made a film together actually, which was a great honor and thrill for me to work with you on a film, and it was really one of in some ways, my favorite film I've ever made. A Good Man. It's about the choreographer Bill T. Jones, and Gordon approached Keith, my partner, and I about collaborating on this project, and it was just a tremendous opportunity. But similarly, we were very careful to shoot the audience of some of these performances, because we wanted to say, as you had remarked to me many years earlier, you need to see how the audience, they are a character in your film, you know, and what's their reaction to this artwork. So let's just show, this is called A Good Man. It's a short clip from that film.
I have dreams about working with him. I feel haunted.
Push them, Shayla, push them, push them.
Fear none of these things.
Push them, push
which
them.
Thou shalt
This is not their home. This is my home. They're moving through.
Make eye contact. You, it's about you. So we don't have this going on, right?
I'll be someday a story they tell at dinner about a guy they worked with. Yeah, but he'll be vivid. Okay, and
Small.
right, that's what I need it to be, all three of them. And what his life was about is hopefully something that they can use. What is intellectual sloth? And what is the antidote to sloth? Maybe it's a bastard who asks you to do.
What can there be said?
We are.
So it's not just a pause. There's feeling in it.
Bill is on fire, and it's good and it's bad sometimes. You know, he comes in with an urgency. Sometimes you're not ready for it.
Do another type of song against it. Do the Scottish song against it.
Or sometimes he comes in and we don't know where he is. And sometimes he shares it with us. This is what I'm feeling. This happened in the world today, and I'm feeling this way.
I'm really not feeling good, and it's going to get worse this afternoon, okay? All right, you understand? But Happy New Year.
I do want to do a quick shout out to the team that worked on that. It was David Simpson who did the editing on that.
Yeah.
Rachel Pikelny and Joanna Brudnick were the producers, and Keith Walker, my business partner, was the DP on that. So we had a great team of people. It was a great project.
And, you know, it's something that you give a lot of thought to, like putting the team together. Like when this project came along, it was like, I knew that there was going to be a big performance. We had tried to do something with Ravinia a couple years earlier that didn't work out.
Right.
But I knew I wanted, like, you know, I shoot a lot of my own films here. I wanted Keith to be the DP. I wanted someone who was at a level of these big theatrical kind of things, would bring something to it. And it was happening in New York. Bob and I would play tag team going to New York to film what was going on and film the process. And so, you know, over the years, I've always given a lot of thought, how do we put the right team to get together for this? And we had both worked with David, and it was like perfect to bring him in as the editor.
Yeah, it was a great success. How much time do we have? Okay, jump forward. More recently, you did a film where you actually combined footage from the '63 boycott, school issue, with a modern day equivalent, and again weave this together. And it's a fascinating film because you realize you have such an incredible archive. You know, from 1963 to 2014 or 2015. You know,
I thought I shot the boycott in '63. I think you'll see a little of the archival here. You know, I was a student, and we had some friends in the civil rights movement who basically said to us, this is going to be a big deal. You guys are film guys, you've got to record it. And had we not done that, it would have been it was lost to history until I finally made this film. And the camera that all the sync, I don't know if there's any sync in this clip, but Bob mentioned these big cameras. I had a big 1,200 foot Oricon, the Oricon 1200. It was 50 pounds on a big wooden tripod that I had in a Volkswagen minibus. And it was all shot out the door of that minibus. You know, you couldn't have possibly gotten it up on your shoulder. Not even Keith could have carried that camera.
You were wheeling the camera around in this minibus.
Well, I had it on, you know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Wow, I never heard that. So we'll show a short clip from that '63 boycott.
The boycott was to be a learning experience. This is your future that you're fighting for.
2-4-6-8, we don't want to segregate. 2-4-6-8, we don't want to segregate. 2-4-6-8, we don't want to segregate.
I feel that segregation by school is all wrong.
Why is it all wrong?
Because why should your child go to a different school than my child? I feel that my child, your child should be able to go to the same school.
I think it shouldn't be no mobile school unit.
No more what?
No mobile school, it's too small.
That day, it was all over the school. And we're going to go downtown and protest. And the next thing I know, we were in the march.
On the day of the boycott, I was very concerned with the way I would look. I certainly would want either my gold chain or my pearls. I wanted to look like someone who should have an education.
People march from the north side, at the west side, the south side, and meet at downtown.
Great, 63 boycott.
Rachel Dixon produced this film with me, and also Kevin, who you're going to hear from, recent film. But one of the things that's in this film, in this clip, I mean, we found people who were in our footage to track down, and it's a whole story about a website. And we found her in the footage, and we had a website where people could ID. We had 500 pictures taken from the footage up there, and it was like Facebook. You could ID somebody and say, this is so-and-so, or this is me, and we were contacting people that way. But we also framed the film, as Bob was talking about, with what was going on in Chicago today. And Rachel had been shooting material about the school closings at that time, and we had also worked on a big school project that we did. And so we brought that into this film to kind of frame the story, to show how little things had changed. And the other thing about this film is that it's a half an hour. It could have easily been an hour. But we talked to a lot of teachers. We like to start the outreach and engagement way before the film is finished. And one of the things that teachers were telling us, hey, you guys make these great movies, and we try to show them, but it's like, 90 minutes, it's like a nightmare for us. What are we supposed, So we committed, we said, this is going to be a half-hour film, because we wanted it shown in the schools.
Yeah. Kevin and Jenny, and Jeff, do you want to introduce them? First of all, a round of applause for Gordon Quinn.
Stand, Mr.
I didn't see enough cheers.
But I want to bring up Jenny to come up and share how you met Gordon, and we'll see the clip of Finding Ying Ying first. You will take Bob's seat and have a conversation with the audience and also with Gordon. And curious to have a look at Finding Ying Ying. If you're not familiar with that title, if you've never heard of that title, raise your hand, just so Jenny knows. A few people have never heard of Finding Ying Ying. It's quite an experience, I'll tell you. We did a talk show about Finding Ying Ying after doing more than 35 shows with a variety of filmmakers. Because this is unique, and Jenny didn't start off making a film about a person named Ying Ying. She went to look for Ying Ying. And I just think this story is the most powerful thing. Your editor is here, and I know that Gordon is significant in your story. So let's have a look at the clip of Finding Ying Ying, and then Jenny Schiff, the filmmaker, will join us. And by the way, you may be hearing Jenny's voice on the track.
April the 30th, 2017. University of Illinois is very beautiful. I feel a little bit lonely, but I still want to try. Ying Ying and I went to the same university in China. Just like Ying Ying, I felt lost in this foreign country.
Police in downstate Urbana-Champaign are asking for help to find a visiting scholar from China who disappeared from the University of Illinois campus last Friday.
Zheng's father and boyfriend arrived in Chicago this morning.
In this new country, I'm here and proud to tell you we will not give up until we find her.
The search for a missing scholar from the University of Illinois is now expanding.
She quickly went from a missing person to a possible kidnapping.
因为我也活到了50多岁了，现在我们没有阴影，等于没有了一切。
总觉得是不是有可能警方弄错了，还有一些好的希望。
I'm feeling a little anxious. I always put my faith in people to help find the way.
I had to sit knowing that I was sitting next to the person who was responsible.
Shocking revelation in court.
I know that you picked her up.
He was well reviewed by his students. Nobody saw this coming. I have no time to be frustrated. There's only one thought in my mind, to try everything to find her.
Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me to be part of the event. And I thought I was going to show a clip, but actually we showed a trailer of the film. So, but I think it's good for those who never heard of the film, just providing the context. So basically, Funny is a film about a Chinese international student who went missing in the summer of 2017. And the whole film, we followed her family looking for her, and we also kind of really getting to know her, who Ian was as a person. And and Gordon, I just really appreciated all the help and the mentorship I got from Gordon. Thank you. I think I can kind of talk about how I first met Gordon. So I was actually a David Fellow, which is a Cartoon Queen's Diverse Voices in Docs Fellowship. I was a fellow back in 2018. I think that was when I graduated from Northwestern. I was a journalism student at the time. And I think there was a workshop for the fellowship. We talk about documentary ethics. And when I first started making this film, I had so many questions, ethical questions, because I feel I was kind of following a family who was kind of devastated, who was very devastated and trying to look for their missing daughter. And to me, as someone never made documentary before and never really worked on stories that about grieving family, I didn't really know how should I maintain my relationship with the film participants. So I remember I think after that workshop, I kind of scheduled a one-on-one meeting with Gordon and talk about the ethical questions I had at that time. And
I mean, you were concerned because you're the same age as their missing daughter. You were helping them with translations and all of that, and you saw that in some ways you were, a stand-in for your daughter, and you were really concerned about the ethics of that, and were you exploiting them, and all of those things. And we had a long conversation, and I remember I being incredibly impressed because basically what I said here, there are no easy answers for the questions that you're asking, but you're asking all the right questions. When I get worried is when I see filmmakers not worrying about these kinds of ethical concerns, not asking those questions, because sometimes the answer isn't easy. And I thought you did a terrific job of, over the year or so that you were making the film, years of navigating that relationship with the family and maintaining that relationship.
Yeah, so just to give more context of the situation I was in when I first started making the film, because I started working on this story, not really thinking about making a feature film. Actually started with I first heard about Ying's disappearance as a Chinese international student, because at that time her disappearance was actually really huge in the Chinese international student community in the U.S. And a lot of us were just trying to helping the family out and try to search for her. So I think I started with a volunteer role, and then I started picking up my camera and started filming. So to me, I think I struggled with I was wearing different hats. One is kind of a volunteer. The other hat is a filmmaker, probably trying to make a film. and whether I started to ask myself like whether I was kind of like exploring the like relationship with the family and take advantage of like like my role, things like that. So I think I was confused, and I feel like Gordon's like advice was very crucial to the film actually, because I think what I learned from that conversation actually guided me like throughout the upcoming like few years, like until I finished this film. And even for me right now, I'm making like more films. I think I'm very like careful about the filmmaker and the film participants, the relationship, and also the power dynamic, because I feel like I will feel really bad, if the situation like go into like a different, totally wrong direction. So yeah, so that's what I learned.
The other thing from those early days, and John is here, the editor, and just a little note, it's like Jenny wasn't going to be in the film. And little by little, it became clear that she had to play some kind of, her voice had to be in the film. She's also the voice of Ying Ying. And again, I think your initial plan was you were going to have somebody else do that. And John and I were both like, you're absolutely perfect to do it. And we were transparent, I think, with the audience that it was your voice. But finding those few shots of you to put into the film so people could like understand that, because you weren't going to be, you hadn't been filming yourself. There were no shots of you. And sometimes how the story gets told, what the point of view is, evolves as the story unfolds.
Yeah, and also I think I want to mention that for me, like I never thought about like being like a documentary filmmaker. And I think even for me, like study, because I was born and raised in China, and I finished my college in China, and I think it was like maybe like at the beginning of like my senior year, I just made a decision very randomly that like I'm going to study abroad, coming to the US. And I went to journalism school at Northwestern. But at that time, I was still thinking about maybe I'm gonna go back to China and take a like kind of a regular job. But then, I don't know, I feel like since I started like making Finding Ying Ying, and I had been working on it like for over like 3 years, the whole experience has totally like changed my perception of kind of like what I really want to do like in my life. And if you ask me like 5 years ago, ask me like what I would do like in the next 5 years, I would never think about like I would actually like be here, like actually pursuing a career path as like a documentary filmmaker. Because I think for me, like making documentaries like really make my life like more meaningful. So I think this is something I feel like I'm really passionate about like, in my life.
I think that one of the things, and maybe you could talk about that a little bit, that you see in Finding Ying Ying is it has a lot to tell American audiences about China, and there's a lot, I think, for China to learn about America if it's shown there.
Yeah, so it actually also related to like, I think what I want to do, like what type of film I really want to make in the future. Because I feel like every time, for American audience, like when we talk about China, there's a certain expectation or certain perception of what China looks like. And I think for the Chinese audience, when we talk about America, there's a certain perception of what the US looks like. But that's not like really the case. So for me, like in the future, I really want to make more films, like China related or about Chinese American, like in the US. So to really create like a mutual understanding, between the two countries, Chinese people and Americans, and also just provide like different perspectives. Because I really feel like right now the documentaries or like the basically films that we've seen about China are not really accurate. So I think I'm just working on that.
Okay, go ahead. Do I stay here?
That's the answer. Yeah, I want to bring up Shaw. Thank you, Jenny, so much. I appreciate your willingness to share these experiences that you've had because they were life-changing. Other people have had life-changing experiences because they had the opportunity to find a mentor and someone who would actually listen and take their work seriously, even though they may not have the credits that a larger company might be looking for. Gordon's always been an amazing listener and a generous spirit. I wanted to turn it over to Kevin after we take a look at the trailer or the link that you actually sent us a clip from the film. Sorry, Jenny. I think you sent us the clip as well as I found the trailer. The trailer is spectacular. What do you people think of the trailer? Would you share that with anybody? It's stunning. Well, we're going to see an actual clip from Kevin's film, which is sold out the last few nights. I believe last night and the night before at the Cisco in the top 10 film series. And so that's a pretty big venue. And for people to leave home and to go sit close together in a big venue says a lot about the importance of this particular film. And you'll see an echo of history very quickly in here, which I think Gordon will appreciate. And I know it helped you guys discuss what possibilities there were for this project, which as a documentary filmmaker, you have to know, these are like wrestling a shark and a tiger at the same time. You're in so many different strange ethical, financial, and artistic problems when you go down these paths that it takes community to do it. So let's have a look at this clip from Let the Little Light Shine, and then you'll hear from Kevin.
Saw in the meeting room the CEO, Janice Jackson, and the Director of Employee Engagement. And on that particular day, I had a Black Students Matter shirt on. So she looked at the shirt and she said, you know, we've given you a lot of chances. We've been really patient with you. Everyone that we've talked to about you has said that you're a really great principal, you're a great person. But at this point, it's really hard for me to believe that you're not coordinating and collaborating with your parents to fight against this school action. And she pointed to my shirt and she said, I mean, right now, you're wearing a shirt that is from an organization that is obviously anti-CPS. And I was taken aback a little bit by that statement because I don't see the shirt as an opposition to Chicago Public Schools. I see it as something that Chicago Public Schools ought to clearly advocate for and support.
NTA is a level 1 plus school. When has ever in the history of CPS have they tried to close a 1 plus school in Chicago? Never!
What they were experiencing and what we were all witnessing together was a movement of parents devoted to saving their school. And Dr. Jackson said, yeah, but you can't be part of that movement. I said, I'm not part of that movement. I'm part of the NTA community, but I'm not the one leading parents in their efforts to try and save the school. Dr. Jackson and the lawyer there asked me to put my official statement in writing in response to the allegations that I was coordinating and orchestrating the parent opposition to the plan, which I did.
We made an agreement before we did this action that today we're not getting arrested.
I still have not yet heard from CPS.
Today, we got out the street voluntarily. In a minute, you're going to be like, we ain't getting out the street.
Oh, and then bring us out the street!
You got to take your mind out of we don't have power and realize the power you have.
That's right, we got power!
What's up, Gordon? How you doing, man? Hey there, Kevin. It's been a while, man. It's been a while that we've been able to
share some space together, so it's good. I think back to what just the general idea of what makes a good mentor, right? And to me, it's kind of like somebody that does it just off of their own volition, you know, like you're just spending some time with someone and you're imparting your knowledge because, you know, you're not getting paid to do it, you're just doing it. It's just something that you like to do, you love filmmaking and what have you. And so, you know, I didn't ask you to be a mentor of mine. That just kind of happened over the course of getting to know you, you know. I think back, you know, I did a movie back in 2010. I'm not sure if you remember this, but it's called The Street Stops Here. It was a movie that was in with PBS and eventually ESPN, more of a sports documentary. And I remember the production company back then was like, man, if we could get Gordon Quinn to write a little something, if you could watch it and maybe give us a little, you know, tagline we could put on our poster or whatever. That would be the best. And you did watch it. And I think you might have gave us something, but you definitely gave us some notes. Which was
that's an occupational hammer. I always, even when it's finished, I'm like, oh, I got a note.
Yeah, and it was great. I mean, to have that happen at that age, at that time frame was tremendous. You know, I'll get nerdy for a little bit. People, I'm sure, know Star Wars or what have you. And to me, you know, you're like the Yoda of documentary filmmaking, okay? So to get any knowledge from you is like, you know, I'm just taking it all in. I'm a sponge. When I got hired to work on America to Me as a segment director with Steve James and Bing Liu and Rebecca Parrish, and just an amazing team. You talked about team earlier, a team of filmmakers that we put together to do that project. I remember one of the first things that we did was we kind of had it's kind of like a workshop. You know, we were talking about the potential characters in that film and participants in that film, and just general strategy and things to look out for. And I just remember filling up my whole notebook, just like everything. I was just taking it all down. One little note too that I remember from that day, you know, my background was primarily before then was in television production and in sports TV. And, you know, a lot of the camera people that I would work with, they weren't the best verite camera people, you know, and so they're filming always standing up and they're kind of looking down on the scenario, on people or what have you, because that's just, you know, they don't want to sit down or whatever. Why would I sit down? Like I feel better standing up or what have you. And I remember one of the things you talked about in terms of shooting in a classroom, and it was about being on the level and the point of view of the students there. And hey, pull up a chair, and get on the same level as them, and you want to film from that perspective. And that just really sat with me because I know that if I had hired a camera person and I was directing a scene, and that person wasn't a verite camera person, they probably would have filmed it, you know, standing up, looking down on a scenario and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like little notes like that I've taken over the course of getting to know you that I really appreciate.
Yeah, it's two of my most common things. Get on eye level with people unless you have a reason not to be, and pay attention to the person who's listening.
Yes,
Don't always be the person who, sometimes when I run a workshop for the camera, I'll say, okay, let's create a little drama. Somebody's breaking up with someone. Who's you want to follow with the camera? The person who's being broken up to. That's where the emotion's going to be. Right. So those are, yeah. Right. But the other thing that has always been important, I think it's in the Cartemplin ethos, it's in, you know, let the little light shine. I'm interested in helping you make the film that you want to make, not kind of take a set of rules or ways of doing, you know, and make the film that I would have made. Right. You know, that's what we, you know, Jenny's film, no one else could have made that film. It's her film. Your film is incredibly powerful and special, and it's your film, your vision. How do we help people realize their vision?
Right. Well, I appreciate that. You know, you're instrumental in the making of the film. You know, as we were wrapping up America to Me, the NTA saga, basically, it's a high-performing elementary school in the South Loop. There's a transition plan to change it into a high school that would benefit the neighborhood's wealthier residents, and then at the same time displacing the traditional, the original student population there. And as that story was unfolding, you know, I was brought aware to it, and I went to you and I said, hey, do you think this is a potential story worth following? And I remember sending you an email on it, and you were like, oh, no doubt, you know. You were enthusiastic about it, and you were like, you know, you should apply to the DIVID program, the Cartenquin Diverse Voices and Documentary Program, because that might help you workshop it and build your grant applications and all that kind of stuff, which it did. So, you know, I appreciate that greatly. And then obviously, as I was starting to follow the story, you needed a producer, and who did you recommend to me? You know, it was Rachel Dixon, who, as we mentioned earlier, was one of the filmmakers, your collaborators on 63 Boycott. And you had said, you know, she's done a lot of good education stories. She might be somebody that would really be interested in this, and you should look into working with her. And so, you know, I found a great collaborator to take this journey on with. And so that's all to you for sure.
Well, and you know, one of the things that nobody knew when you started, I was at the screening the other night, you know, kind of a big Chicago Doc 10 screening. All the subjects are there. Spectacular screening, packed with people. And Rachel made a really good point. She said, I'd done a lot of things. We did Boycott. She'd done other things about the school closing. She said, they're all so sad. You know, and I remember at a certain point when she was working on one of her own films, she was like, I don't even know if I can finish this. It's too depressive. And NTA, they win.
Right.
And
you just spoiled it for people who haven't seen it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's huge. It's huge. It's huge. And it, you know, I think the film is going to be an inspiration to the whole movement and struggle around public education in this country, because it actually, it's not like you came in at the tail end and picked it up. Right. You were there at the beginning in the struggle when a lot of people didn't think they could win.
Right, right. And when, you know, you had some great advice as we were filming throughout the course of that whole time frame. Obviously, it is not a project that the district is going to give a filmmaker permission to film. And I remember you saying, well, you know, you should still do it, and maybe you can ask for forgiveness later. Yeah. So that's exactly what we are doing right now. Asking for forgiveness later. No, but I just remember all the great advice that you gave to us as we would bring in certain scenarios. And then obviously with the edit, I wanted to wait to show you the edit until I really felt it was in a you know, I'm not gonna say perfect place, but a place where I felt like it was really, really strong. And so when I was able to finally show it to you, probably this year, I think, right? Earlier this beginning of this year.
You were close to done, but I had notes.
Oh yeah, you had notes. That was great. And we had, you know, I was like, yep. Okay, that's a good note. That's a good note. And you're like, I'm hungry for an education scene right here. You know, I'm starving for it because And you know, I ended up adding another scene of some education going on in the school based off of that note. I'm like, man, I'm just getting killed on my running time here. PBS just gonna kill me, but you know, it was a good note that you know, definitely had to add for sure. I appreciate you, Dan. You're good. You know, you are a treasure to this community for sure. And you know, there's filmmakers out here who are looking for advice, there's no better person to go to and no better resource.
Well, we're now all part of this community. You know, you live here, you're based here, and I think it is one of the things that is important to understand about the Kartemquin family, the Kartemquin ethos, which is there's a lot of people who give advice. Steve has been a great mentor of yours. Maggie Bowman is part of that community. There's a whole lot of people that kind of make up that ethos of Chicago documentary filmmaking, which I think has got a real, a special flavor to it in that a lot of us see each other as, you know, kind of colleagues and, you know, not competitors. Right. You know, you go into some other cities and everybody's sort of competing, trying to get ahead. Here it's like, yeah, these are my people. These are my, you know, my community that I want to be a part of, and I see people growing into those senior roles.
Yeah, so much more important to be a collaborator and a colleague than a competitor. So I know that if I can be half the mentor you've been to myself and to other filmmakers, then, you know, I'm in a good spot. So appreciate that.
Well, we all learn from each other.
Thank you.
So usually, one of the fun things of the Doc Talk Show is that audience members participate. They actually have comments, questions. We'd like to see if there's any questions that are on your mind and you've been dying to ask them. I see Tom Clark's hand is up over there. So fire away, but with a loud voice. I'll repeat it if I think people can't hear.
Gordon Quinn, what's the status of your documentary?
Well, I think a lot of people know that I had really bad, I was an early adopter back in March of 2020. I got really bad COVID and in the hospital and rehab and pretty much made a full recovery. And when I was intubated, you know, on the ventilator, I'm getting an idea for a movie, even in that state. And I was like, I'm ready to check out. You know, I'm pretty old. This is not going well, and you know, I could have gone either way. But once I had an idea for a film, it's like, well, I guess I got to come back and make that film. And I talked from the hospital. I talked to a few people about it, and but I'm actually probably not going to do that film. Good Morning America made a short piece on me. I shared some of the videos I made with my BlackBerry cell phone in the hospital. And they did, you know, I felt it sort of got at some of it, and then I got to do a ground rounds with the doctor who I had the DNR drama with, a very young doctor who was the one who was about to extubate me. And some of what I wanted to get at, I felt I got to express through other kind of forms, so I don't know that I'll necessarily make another film about that. But yeah, I was really thinking about it, and it certainly was, it passed through my mind. It's like, oh, okay, I guess I gotta go make this movie. I guess I gotta come back from wherever I'm heading off to.
That's a true story, by the way. You didn't make that up. Well, who else has a question? Anybody? Or comment?
Complaint.
Complaint, yeah, this is the time to get it. Anybody?
So the old camera from the '60s board that you were shooting at,
Yeah.
Was that an Eclair or was it an Eclair?
No, yeah, I've shot with an Eclair a few times, but I didn't like it. It was very front heavy. And this was based on the Leacock Pennybaker camera. It was an Oricon conversion.
Oricon.
Yeah, so General camera would slice the top off, and you could put a Mitchell magazine on top of it. And we would have to find I bought my first lens from Al Maisel because you needed the short finder so you could get it up on your shoulder. And I bought the lens that he shot Showman with, you know, so I would always think, oh, well, this lens that I'm using looked at Sophia Loren. Yeah, and then, you know, I had a CP16 when they came out with a reflex camera, and then the camera that I used for many years, which was the Aton, which really fit nicely on your shoulder. and then we moved to video.
Do you have any of them still?
I
I remember seeing a bunch in your office.
Yeah, well, we have like an old Betacam, but most of our cameras were sold to buy the next camera. So the only film camera that I really have is that camera one, because that was home built, and so.
Do you still have that?
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. And I mentioned earlier, go on YouTube, camera one, Cartemplin. You could see Morgan Johnson, who was one of the producers of Unapologetic, made a little film about camera one and how we made it and what it did. Yeah.
Any other questions for Gordon or Kevin or Jenny for that matter, or Bob?
You talked about like adapting storytelling techniques to the story, like going from not having a narrator to having a narrator. Do you ever question if you're making the right choice, and like how do you go about it?
In a sense, there's two answers to that. One is, yeah, you're always questioning it, you know, and kind of Jenny described some of that, how she was questioning herself and her relationship to her subjects. But the other side of it is like, no, you've got to have confidence in the decisions that you make and be ready to know that you're going to make some mistakes. And what I always say to people is the important thing about making a mistake is to own it, to know you did it, acknowledge it, admit it, and own it, and learn from it. So yeah, that's what I love though about. And for many years, I know Kevin understands this, you've worked for a lot of clients, filming, corporate video, industrials, whatever. I did very few commercials in my time, but I've done a few. And it's like, particularly like industrials, I used to love doing that. You're in a place, we did work for McDonald's. We're in the French fry factory. I'm learning all about how they do it. We're doing corporate video. I'm learning how they think. I'm in a culture and learning about that culture. I've done things around medicine over the years. You're in the culture of medicine. And it's why I realized that I really never wanted to go into feature filmmaking, because the story, the creative, the art, there's a lot of challenges there. But the culture we're in is the culture of making feature films, There's a joke about how do you know when a Teamster's dead? Dropped his donut, It's like, but when you make a documentary, you're in a whole new culture that you're trying to make sense of. You can see it in Let the Little Light Shine. You're in the school, and I don't know how many schools you were in over the years that were that good. You're in a school that you're trying to understand, or you're trying to understand the parents' relationship to that school, and you've never experienced that before. So that's what I find so exciting about it.
Any other questions? I see a hand up here.
Yeah, it seems like you could do revisions forever on a film. So my question is, where do you draw the line between a rough cut and a fine cut? And where do you draw the line, where the film is done and it's time to move on to the next one?
We have John here. I was an editor for many years, and I'm now that irritating person sitting behind the editor saying, that could be a little shorter there. I used to have that person behind me. But one of the most important things about editing is to know when you've turned the corner. And I sometimes see people who they're trying to go back, and it's like, it's like that Robert Frost poem, it's like I came to a forest and I took a road, and that made all the difference, and you don't go back. So you rework things, all of those kind of things happen, but you also just have to have that confidence to say, I know this could be a different film, and it used to be when we edited film, it was a lot harder to go back. When I was an assistant editor, I literally had to reconstitute the work print that had been cut apart. And in the earliest years, I was working before the guillotine splicer. We were using hot splicers, so you'd lose a frame and a half, and you'd have to put that frame and a half back in as a little piece of black leader and splice all. It was a nightmare, So you didn't go back that much, Now with the Avid, it's like boom, you go back, So, but I think that discipline actually of learning to edit that way was pretty helpful.
Any other questions? Oh, here.
So when stories are coming to your attention, is there a certain spark that makes you choose one over the other, or does it depend on each individual case?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, sometimes there's circumstance. I did a film 10 years ago with Howard Reich, the Tribune jazz critic, about his mother called Prisoner of Her Past. And I never thought that I would wind up doing a story with a Holocaust theme. And Howard had done this big part in the newspaper. And I, when I'd read the story, I didn't really think about it. And then when he brought it to, it was like, oh yeah, right in the first meeting, it's like, we're gonna do this. There was something about it. And I remember when J.J. Hanley, the woman who brought Refrigerator Mothers to us, and she had an autistic child. It's a film about the mothers of autism who were said that they were cold like refrigerators. That's what caused the autism. All discredited, all wrong. And these women had never had their story told. I had been at the University of Chicago with Bettelheim, the guy who promulgated this. I knew a lot about the story. I even knew one of the women who winds up being in our film was somebody that I knew, the mother of an autistic child. I never thought of it as a film until JJ came in the door. She'd been researching it for 2 years, and she kind of like, a film needs to be made about this. And it was just like, oh yeah, I get it. But I didn't see it myself, even though I knew a lot about the story. So, there's a lot of intangibles that go into it.
Well, thank you all. And I want to wrap up by saying that there are a lot of different lessons you can glean from tonight. This was live streamed. That's the first time for us, and inspired by the unique opportunity to come back in a real place. So thank you to the crew here that's made the live stream happen. I also want to thank our sponsors. We can't actually do this without help. And Columbia College is just one of them, but another important sponsor is Media Process Group, which has been a champion of this project from the earliest time. We also have sponsored Camera Ambassador, which is an equipment rental house in town that's been very supportive. And in the very beginning, when this idea was just sparking, there was a real problem in the country, and that problem still exists today, and it's a lack of spaces like this. A lack of places where you can have a substantive conversation with good people about topics and art that are close to people's hearts. Where do you go for this? I didn't know. I wanted to figure it out. I called Gordon. I said, I think we should be doing something on a regular with food and drink, because we all need it now more than ever. This was less than a month after the worst election result in the history of my life, when I still was convinced it would be reversed. At any rate, these were like sessions of collegial and convivial and fun community experiences that I had never had before, and none of them could have happened without a range of people saying, yeah, that sounds like something we should do. How perfect that we found a place called Uncommon Ground, and that they said, yeah, let's do this. And we've been doing this since December of 2016 with a major pivot into Zoom, which nobody anticipated or wanted. And now we're very, very happy that you're all here. And to thank you and to show our appreciation, I wanted to say that our next event, which is a month away, and it'll be the last Wednesday in June, can feature work that you want to share. You're here. You may have a short clip that you'd like to share. Let's regroup again. Bring your friends. Bring people who want that substantial conversation, even if there's a short clip. The purpose is how this started this evening, with all of you talking. everybody's seeing each other, a lot of hugs going around the room. And there are young people in the room who are new to this community, like we all were at some point, not knowing people. So I'd love for you to send an email. You can go to the website, which is www.thedogtalkshow.com. Go to the contact, that's one way. Another way is go to Instagram and go to the hashtag #TheDogTalkShow. Say what you'd like to bring and share. Just plan to bring a friend. Bring somebody who's not in this conversation in this community, but who would appreciate it. And let's meet again the last Wednesday of the month. And you can count on that for July. We'll continue as long as people want to do it. We are very fortunate that Uncommon Ground survived this plague, as many restaurants did not. So your willingness to come, to just order dinner, have drinks, and meet up with friends is really significant here. Not taken for granted. We want to thank you all for coming, and I hope that we'll be able to do this again and see you again at the last Wednesday of June. And this will be something we can communicate about in the interim. If you think that there might be an organization that would like to take a last Wednesday of the month in the future of this calendar year, let me know, because we do co-curation and co-hosting as much as we can. We don't want this to be a stale show with one host. We want to continue to grow the community with new voices, and this was a real testament to you, Gordon, tonight, because I was one of those kids who came, didn't know anybody, and met you at a screening in 1985 of a documentary long before Netflix and Sundance, and the place that you would see documentaries was PBS, period. There weren't festivals lined up to buy the work or even show the work of documentary filmmakers. Gordon and I met at a screening where there might have been 10 people. It was at a nonprofit organization called Chicago Filmmakers. It still exists.
Yeah.
Any of you involved? Know about it? So Gordon and I met. He didn't make that film. I had nothing to do with it. And we got to talking, just like you get to talk to each other at the Dog Talk Show. He invited me to come see what he does at a place called Kartemquin. I couldn't remember the name, but the address showed up. When I got there, he poured me a cup of hot tea, asked me what I'm doing. I told him about a documentary that I was in the process of making about Harold Washington and an integrated college in a segregated city. Gordon actually looked me in the eye and said, "That sounds very interesting. Have you done it yet?" I said, "No, I'm just starting out, starting to film. I have access to the mayor." And he said, "Oh, that's very cool. And let me show you some of the stuff we're doing." He literally went into a room and pulled out a 16mm projector, brought it over to another room, and told me to come sit in this room while he threaded the last Pullman car, which you saw a clip of tonight, on a projector, which I got to watch with a cup of tea from Gordon, and then had a nice conversation. That's a life changer. Somebody validated the thought I had for a project. Somebody said, "That's a good idea. Let's talk about what is possible, and let me show you what we've been doing." That made a huge impression on me. And you're looking at somebody who didn't come from Chicago, didn't study documentary film, and didn't have film experience. I worked in Hollywood and grew up in LA and worked at MGM and at Universal and as a gopher for Norman Lear's company. Some of you know Norman Lear. And also as a location manager for Chuck Barris. Alpha and Omega of entertainment and television. Chuck Barris, the guy who created the dating game, the Newlywed Game, and the Gong Show.
Gong Show.
The Gong Show was great. I was actually credited on that film as a location manager. I'm very proud of that. But I want you to know that when you come to Chicago, after having that kind of background, and you walk into an old house on Wellington, and really start to think about that over the years, as you observe what happens in that house, and the many people who've come through and met Gordon as I did, you will never forget that, and you'll appreciate it as long as you live. And I certainly do, Gordon. So thank you so much for just extending a hand and being that way to everybody who's come through Chicago, who's called on you. So thank you. And thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Dane. you know, when you were talking, it made me think, in that old BA paper of mine from the 60s, one of the things I talk about was something that was very important to John Dewey, which is face-to-face communication. We're in a medium where people look at screens. And one of the things that I say is screens are a stepping stone to bringing people into face-to-face communication. It's another level of complexity. So it's great that you bring people together, Jeff. Hey, now it can go, right?
You were free to leave. Listen, this room is ours. You can enjoy conversation. You can hobnob with friends, get up and stretch your legs and say hi to somebody who you know is here, but you haven't had a chance to talk to them. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I look forward to hearing from you as soon as possible about what you might like to show next time.